Well, hello, that's me again. Today is November 1st, 2023. It's Wednesday, I believe, and I want to immediately point out to people who begin to worry that, oh my God, you haven't been around for like 5 days. Guys, if you want to make sure that I'm still alive and, and kicking, or at least try to kick, you can always visit my blog. I mean, I post sometime there when I'm not obviously making my videos. And there is another issue here. I'm writing a book, guys, and the last 4 days I was basically browsing over the works of Mr. Thayer Machen, Alfred Thayer Machen, The Influence of the Sea Power on History. I read Gorshkov because I'm writing the book. My fourth book is about strategy and about basically what happened to the Western civilization. So I needed this time to read and to refresh things which I knew, but you need to refresh them when you write them. But boy, do we have things to discuss. Obviously, one of them is that Mr. Lindsey Graham is genocidal maniac, who in his interview to CNN says that he doesn't really have the threshold of how many kids will be killed by Israeli defense forces in the Gaza Strip, but that's what you would expect from Lindsey Graham and people who elect him. So, well, guess what? Genocidal maniac he is. But we will need to start with also issues of the overall situation and dawning realization of what is going on in Ukraine, apart from obviously basically the genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. And we will start, of course, with this thing. These are the riots which happened in the Republic of Dagestan, which were anti-Jewish, and to which Russian power reacted immediately, dramatically, with just basically cracking down on them. And here's Alexander Rogers, my friend. He talks about who is behind that. It's, as he called him, the rotten teeth foreign agent, Ilya Ponomaryov. He admitted that it was his Telegram resources and that he was the one guy who was trying to incite this basically rioting. And guess what? This guy who knows where he is right now, and who is the very well defined enemy of Russia and Russian people, look at his Ponomaryov's curriculum vitae to understand who this guy is. Look at his face. It's degenerate, but he is, look at this. Following the start of the 2022 Russian invasion, Ponomaryov stated that he had joined Ukraine's territorial defense forces, and he denounced the invasion. Ponomaryov also endorsed acts of sabotage and arson in Russia, in basically terrorism, and launched a Russian language opposition television channel called February Morning. Following the killing of Daria Dugina, Ponomaryov has claimed to have been in contact with his unknown group called the National Republican Army, which he said he claimed responsibility for the killing, and on and on and on. So the guy is basically a terrorist, and guess what? He obviously, when you look actually where his career started as businessman, he worked for obviously the company Yukos of Mr. Khodorkovsky, and Mr. Khodorkovsky has his hands, in blood of just killing his basically competitors, and it's a whole other story about what type of people basically combined West loves to give their support and asylum nowadays. But truth is, as Ramzan Kadyrov also stated, that any rioters who try to conduct those anti-Jewish pogroms, they will be shot in the head, he suggested. Or you know what, make 3 warning shots in the air, and then after that the person does not abide by the law, make the 4th shot in his forehead, the senior official added, describing the instruction as an order. The chilling warning comes after a mob, which was allegedly riled up by Ukraine-linked social media channel, claimed that the refugees from Israel were arriving in planes, breached the international airport in Makhachkala, Dagestan on Sunday night. Riot police were deployed. There are all kinds of FSB people. The number of arrests have been made, and those guys are facing real serious situation. Russia will not allow any kind anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish riots, period. These are Russian citizens. And that's what I wanted to say, that, well, while we look at basically IDF and Israel committing a war crime, some people call it genocide, obviously, and what is happening to the civilian population of Gaza Strip, don't forget, Russia has quite a significant number of Russian citizens who also have dual citizenship in Israel, but those are Russian citizens, and Russia will not allow anybody to conduct any kind of the ethnic cleansing or ethnic pogroms, riots, and as Ramzan Kadyrov stated, anything which will happen in Caucasus, we better shoot them on spot. And that's the only way to do it, and evidently the crackdown was very severe. Russia will not allow any kind of things like that to happen on the inside anymore. And that is clear message to Ponomaryov and all kinds of the shysters and criminals and terrorists which West wants to cover and which West wanted to give the asylum to. Well, guess what? Suddenly French, being French of course, have this issue. They suddenly want to deport those people who created the riots in France. Look at this. The French authorities intend to expel 39 Russians suspected of adhering to Islamic radicalism from the country, said the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Republic, Gerald Darmanin, on the air in the radio station RMC. We have compiled a list of 39 Russian citizens whom we are monitoring particularly closely because of the suspicion of radicalization. Last week we presented it to Russian authorities, the minister stated. Well, guess what? Why did present those the Russian authorities? Because they want now to deport those people back. As he says, these are citizens who are on the list of persons who pose a threat to national security in France. And guess what? On October 20, 57-year-old Mohamed Magushkov attacked the staff of Gambetta Lyceum with a knife. Dominique Bernard, I don't know, see the number, old French teacher was killed and 3 others were injured. The attacker was detained. He turned out to be on the S list. At the same time, his brother was detained near another school. It turned out to be Mossad Magushkov, who was previously convicted of publishing materials of terrorist organization on social network Islamic State. Well, guess what Russians' response was? Russian public stated, hello, these were your freedom fighters a few years back. Enjoy. Russia is not gonna accept deportation. Let France deal with this. And let me tell you, there are some events happening in France now which are very interesting, especially in terms of the basically major French TV channels like France 2. And guess what? I need to get you into this because obviously nobody will report this actually in the Anglo-speaking world. But guess what? We have all things documented, and let's start with this when we have that at France 2 channel, all those bunch of the creeps, and there present have been all kinds of people there, for example, from leading media journalists to former President François Hollande, Mr. Villepin, who is a former Prime Minister. And look what this. Eric Burnett, a journalist for LCI, shouted on France 2 all times, all manners, all mores, as we say. We are all going to die. France, together with the entire West, is being sucked into whirlpool, into abyss. We're trapped. One wrong move could kill our future. Dominique Villepin, former French Prime Minister, and Foreign Minister Ehud Eric on RMC. And guess what? Things started to go there, I mean, completely disintegrating. As you can see yourself, you see Mr. Hollande, who was in there as a president of France in 2010s. He was the guy who started to destroy Russian-French relations, and he succeeded. And guess what? And as he says, one of these journalists, almost shouting, we're now in a state of tectonic confrontation. We, France, and if you like Israel, are very fragile in our democratic nature. Our really Israel is democracy? I thought it was apartheid state, but hey, whatever. It may seem ridiculous when I talk about Israel's fragility, but it's true. Israel is a democratic drop in the ocean of Arab world. Democracy is very fragile, and now tectonic shifts are taking place, and I'm afraid in this colossal confrontation, for the first time in history, France is in a vulnerable, feeble state. No, it's not the first time, but hey, whatever. What is now rolling over France is a global wave, and we, with our little standards and attempts to defend our values, are just ridiculous. We will simply be washed away. Of course we have to fight, but we are all going to die. Well, I have news for France. You wanted it. You allowed the basically Islamization of France for many decades now, and you were lying about this non-stop. And your elites, which France elects time after time after time. How about dissolving Sorbonne in terms of its humanities and all those government schools in France which they call themselves outstanding, while in reality they produce absolute, sleazes like, well, Mr. Hollande or Mr. Macron, but that doesn't stop them. Suddenly they begin to kind of exchange on this TV program, which was several days ago, and he's talking about that. I solemnly accuse all of you who are present in the studio right now, and myself together with you, for the fact that we have been explaining to the audience for a year and a half that Putin has very little left, that he has 25, not crayfish, they mean 25 cancers, and he will definitely not last until next weekend. We have said that international sanctions will kill the Russian economy, that there will be an opposition in Russia, that without the oligarchs everything in Russia will collapse, that the Russian economy is finished, that Putin has no support anywhere, neither in Russia nor abroad. Well, I already stated, fire all your professors who teach in your, basically, what you think French, privileged schools, because they are morons. You're actually people who are specialists in Russia, in France, are also morons. You know nothing about Russia, you never knew. Everything you can do is PR, and you killed the country. So I'm sorry to say this, but France is done. It's not gonna be France anymore, as we used to know it. And then they say, exactly, and you also said that Putin suffers from dementia, that just a little bit more and the Russian people will revolt, that Russian troops will never take Bakhmut, that they will all die there and it will be just magnificent. And you quoted the Minister of Economy, Bruno Le Maire, who has been bringing the Russian economy to its knees for several years. I have news for France. Economically, France is a pipsqueak compared to Russia. And not to speak about military, France will have its economic bottom falling off if they try to replicate what Russians do in terms of military. But then he said, Eric Brunet, that, but instead of all that we have promised, what do we see in reality? Putin has become an idol of the South. The Arab world is shouting, bravo Putin, long live Putin the mediator, long live Putin the negotiator, he will bring peace to our land. Well, to a certain degree, the global South is correct when they say this. But of course, the conclusion of this hysteria on the France too is absolutely magnificent. Philippine, the former prime minister, he tries to contradict. That's not the point. We are all now facing history. No one can influence the situation alone, not even the United States. We now live in a new world and we are no longer its masters. Well, I have news for France. France haven't been masters of this new world like forever. It is the lapdog of the United States and it will do what is told. And he says, he continues, we cannot speak from a position of strength because we are not in that position. We are no longer gendarmes. We cannot rule the world. We need everyone's help, absolutely everyone. And then there's this stupid gal, there are no smart people working on the French media, says, and what about the Russians? Do we need to ask the Russians for help? Philippine answer, only yesterday our ardent opponent, it's Russian comments, who demanded the defeat of Russia, suddenly became a pragmatist. We need the help of everyone, even the Russians. I'm not saying that we should bow down to them ourselves, but if they can make their contribution and calm down any of the parties, we should not refuse this help. Well, there is an issue though, and here is the thing which they still do not understand. They it's not miscalculation. They committed suicide. They committed suicide in France because their political elites are stupid, corrupt, utterly. Their education system sucks. And basically, France is living out its last days as we know it because it's not going to be France, and that's not going to be civil war. That will be war of the basically fundamentalist Islam, which is omnipresent, and other types of the ethnic minorities from obviously and races from Africa and sub-Saharan Africa. They do not share those values which French consider to be universal and very important. Well, not anymore. As I already stated, France is unrecognizable. Paris stinks with urine. And basically the French population, which is indigenous French population, I mean, come on, they will go out and vote for Macron again. So, I mean, just please. So, this is a done deal, and so the fact that they are now hysterical, they are afraid of the hostilities inside France, and then they actually suddenly recognize, oh my God, all those Chechen terrorists, and not only Chechen, Ingush, and other who have been connected to the basically Islamist movement and were basically terrorists, and suddenly they recognize it, but they gave their asylum to them. Look how many of them live in, for example, in UK. You wanted it, and that's the price you have to pay. There are consequences for the actions, and that is why when I say this, I totally sympathize with the French people, original French people, indigenous, but they allowed this, and that's simple as that. And nothing could be done about it, while Russia, well, absolutely, Russia takes the position, which the only normal position in this situation. It's not her war, but Russia will try to stop what is happening right now. I mean, just mass murder, basically, of the Palestinian civilians. Now we have the guy from the United Nations who is basically begins to, another guy with this supposedly principle, and he says that organization United Nations has surrendered to the power of the US and given into the Israeli lobby. Craig Mohaber has said, the director of the UN's Human Rights Office. He resigned because he cannot take this anymore, because UN failed to provide any kind of the deterrent, if you wish, from what is happening now in Gaza. And he is not the first guy who evidently is resigning. There are some people in State Department, to my greatest applause, people of integrity who said we cannot take this anymore. And so, but then again, what is UN today? UN as it exists today is basically utterly corrupt organization, as are corrupt all other international institutions of the world, Pax Americana. For example, International Olympic Committee. I mean, Olympic movement is dead, guys. I'm sorry. And I mean, you know what? Just allow all those drugs and whatever they're to allow to be taken by those athletes. Let's start making, all kinds of the humanoid, freaks, sports games. But it's not International Olympic Committee, it's not real Olympic movement. So, and when you go over this, or cultural other things, it's imploding onto itself as we speak. But this all, of course, when we talk about the horror, basically, of the what is happening in Gaza, we shouldn't forget this guy, of course, Mr. Zelensky, and as you can see yourself, the magazine just published the big thing about this guy and special military operation, and again, you have to understand, American media are completely compromised. Everything they do, all those Washington Post, Time magazines, they are all tabloids. They're not serious expert publications. They are just tabloids with many people who write for them being absolutely as ignorant as French elites who brought the country to its knees. So here we are. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Nobody. And this is Mr. Zelensky. Sure, of course he believes it. But let me put it this way. First, we have to go to Düsseldorf's very own Handelsblatt, which says that actually patriotic but inexperienced, how the volunteer fighters of Ukraine will be crushed. At the beginning of the war, tens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens volunteered for military service. In the war of position, they are now in distress. It was yesterday. Well, I have news for this author and for Handelsblatt. Let me pull up actually the situation around Avdiivka, which today we spoke about this with Scott Ritter, Marat Khairulin, Vera, and me. If you look at Avdiivka 4 days ago, and we have about another 30,000+ stuck in there. This is actually the map the way it's supposed to look like. But as you can see yourself, pincers are very close. It was on the 4th, 4 days ago. As you can see yourself, Avdiivka is this kind of long worm. You know, with the north, there is a industrial zone. Now let's go to the yesterday Avdiivka situation. And as you can see yourself, and guess what? This is not a Russian map. This is Ukrainians. They admit it. Look at the Russian on the top. It was a couple of days ago. Bottom, as you can see yourself, Avdiivka right now, not only Slavyanka Brigade is fighting inside the industrial zone now, and actually Avdiivka is in a complete operational cauldron. Everything is controlled by Russian fires, and basically it's just a matter of time when this thing will be done. But if you anybody wants to dispute of what has been spoken about the fact what is happening in terms of the losses, well, if you don't believe me, or if you don't believe Russian Ministry of Defense, let me pull up here for you the guy who is a former colonel, a retired colonel, one of the major real Russian and well connected to the general staff, and one of the editors of the Arsenal of Motherland professional military publication, Mr. Leonkov. And basically, when RIA News talks about what is written in Time magazine, is a kind of diagnosis close to objectivity, Mr. Leonkov says, and the most important factor remains the human factor. They will no longer be able to assemble the same combat-ready army that they had before February 24. It will not even be possible to gather the forces that were before the counteroffensive, in quotation marks. Moreover, neither foreign mercenaries nor terrorists who are fighting for them will help them. Ukraine mobilization resources have been exhausted. And then Leonkov provides a very important data. And again, unlike all those TG channels, unlike all those, so-called Russia specialists who write all kinds of garbage, and there are people who try to challenge me constantly because they think that I'm mathematically challenged. Well, here are some data for you disclosed by the people who really know what they are talking about. They even know it better than many top-notch Russian journalists. And although, what Marat Khairulin will probably support these numbers. Look at this. Speaking about mobilization reserve, the expert, Mr. Leonkov, noted that at the beginning of the special military operation, Ukraine had 2 million reservists. Of this, 65% have already crossed the line of contact. That means they have been at the line of contact. And of this, between 65 and 80% have not returned home and are listed as either dead or missing. And these guys are real intelligence. Do you know how to calculate these numbers? Well, calculate. Multiply 2 million by 0.65 and then multiply the resultant again by, if you want a lower number of 0.65. Guess what you get in terms of KIAs and missing in action? Count yourself. It's around 800,000. But the truth is, what is happening right now, it's very difficult to explain to people. The catastrophe, it's basically, as my friend Marat Khairulin stated, basically they are Russian troops now jumping into the trenches, and the Ukrainian infantry is so demoralized, they don't even shoot back. They drop the weapons, run into the dugouts, and just lock themselves in the dugouts. It's a simple thing like children do when they hide underneath the blanket because they have fears, night fears. Well, that's what is happening right now, and this is why those Russian advances around Avdiivka, there is a horrendous cauldron is forming now around Bakhmut, and Russians obviously advancing at Kupiansk operational axis. And the more it happens, the more you have the hysteria, which basically hits the, Western elites. And Mr. Of course, if talking about Western elites and how to put it, here's Mr. Mike Flynn, General Mike Flynn, a real American patriot, and actually the guy who have been betrayed naturally by Mr. Trump. And he shuts down Nikki Haley, this genocidal maniac and, absolutely insane neocon nut job. And General Mike Flynn basically provides a wonderful diagnosis of what I've been talking about for years now. He talks about Nikki Haley. Mark my words, those who would abandon Ukraine today are at risk of abandoning Israel tomorrow. They lost sight of who our friends are, who our enemies are, who is good and who is evil. That is not who you want in the Oval Office. Well, General Mike Flynn, who you remember, he was the guy who ran the basically DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and he was the National Security Advisor of Mr. President-elect, Mr. Trump. He was, of course, being thrown by Mr. Trump under the bus. But guess what he says? He talks to Nikki Haley and he tells her, you speak of wars as though you know them personally. You don't. The day you do is the day you'll realize you've been wrong on most issues, especially Ukraine. Stop promoting something you don't understand and start promoting how we can fix America first. She cannot promote it. Nobody in Washington can promote something how to fix basically America, which is in the distress. And we're talking about that some of it are terminal illnesses, but I will be making special videos on this issue. And when you look at the news which coming from the front in Ukraine, well, here it is. This is, again, look at this. Yesterday, old Soviet T-72 from the 114th Brigade near Avdiivka. First shot, bang. One of the Leopards, the latest one, is done. Basically, there you go. And these are some tank battles which are happening there, and I'll be talking about it in terms of how they affect things tactically and operationally. But no, tank warfare is not done. It's just gonna change itself, and it's gonna transform itself into something what we never saw before. And this is basically their trial and error, basically operations which are happening right now in the special military operation, and they contribute immensely to military science, and we will see basically how it all develops in the nearest future, especially in terms of Russian army constantly adapting, constantly developing itself into something new. And one of those things is this. Well, if this hasn't been enough, now Su-57 fighters received a long-range cruise missile. And now they say, well, they received a long-range intra-fuselage cruise missile was created, and informed sources say, and it has a range comparable with those products that are used in long-range aviation on Tu-95 MS and Tu-160 strategic bombers. They carry the basically munitions which are between 1.6 and 5.5 thousand kilometers nowadays. If a Su-57 is capable now to carry this type of the weapons, especially inside fuselage, we're looking at some absolutely astonishing missile and air combat technologies. And what can I say? I mean, sure. What kind of other basically commentaries do you need on that? Because we're looking at the explosive development of the technologies of the future, and they are driven by Russia and the Russian military. And this is just the part of the things which need to be discussed, and I'll be talking videos about it down the road, but for now, for today, this is what I had to say, guys. And this is kind of the 1st of November, first video of this month. And let me tell you, the world is, just turning with increasing speed. We have indeed entered the incredible situation of which I stated a number of times that we are in the World War III, it's just different war. And for now, it's entirely up to Russia and China. Mr. Shoigu was in China as the guest of honor and keynote speaker just recently, is to not allow this world to go haywire completely and stop the killing in Gaza Strip too. So we'll see where it all leads. And we need to keep in mind that some, as Alistair Crook, in his one of the best his sit reps, he did on Judge Napolitano, he noted that Mr. Bibi Netanyahu and a bunch of his cabinet are eschatological people. They are driven by those ridiculous religious beliefs in the end of times, eschatological being, of course, the issue of the end of days, the fate, final fate of humanity, or end of times the way we knew it, and maybe something new popping up. In some sense, it's correct, but I mean, when you are driven by these fanatical beliefs, well, you get Gaza Strip and you get Ukraine. But that is all about basically neocons understanding, because they don't know what their rear gear is, basically killing themselves and killing very many people by doing this, including killing the whole countries. France is basically one, you saw yourself what it is. United States, well, that's a separate issue we'll need to talk about. So this is it for today, guys. And as always, those people who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel and support me on Patreon, pardon my French, and buy me a coffee too. I will really appreciate this. And you know what can I say? Have a nice rest of the week. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.